Welcome back to putting a Toyota 4.7 liter V8 with an all-wheel drive transfer case and solid front axles in this Volvo 940 before driving it across the country to the OG Gambler 500. And today I got a whole cart full of stuff to try and get the engine and transmission held in place for good or temporarily for good. I've got some stuff to make a transmission mount from scratch. There's obviously no off-the-shelf kit that puts a Toyota drivetrain in a Volvo, so I'm going to make something from scratch. I've got a whole box full of transmission mounts from a handful of different Toyotas that had this transfer case to see which one's going to fit the best, or if they're even different. They all have different part numbers, but I have no idea. And I've got this engine support bar, so I can finally get rid of the engine hoist, which has been sitting there holding the engine up for at least 3 years while this project has been off and on in my garage. So by the end of this episode, I would like to have the engine held up and the transmission held up with nothing underneath the car or sticking out in front of it, so I can start moving on to the next things and figuring out where the axle is going to go, where the suspension is going to be in the front, and engine mounts and everything else that's got to go in the car. So enough yapping, let's get into it. So one of the things I'm finding out real quick on a project like this, which to be clear, I've never done an engine swap before, so this is my first time and I'm figuring it out, is the order of operations is half the battle. So you're not redoing things and you're not getting stuck waiting for other stuff to get done. And I think the first step for this stage is going to be the transmission mounts. So let's get this box open and see what I got. I thought I ordered 3 or 4 of these, but I did order this box a year ago. So it looks like I got 2 to work with and the Rock Auto sticker, which is half the fun of ordering things. So let me see what's different about these 2. One thing that stands out is one is a lot thicker than the other, like wider, and that gives it a lot more rubber in the mount. So I don't know, I'll throw these under the car and see which one works best. Okay, so this is the Tacoma. One thing I'm just now realizing, these bolt holes are very close to one edge and much farther from the other. And there's a little lip right here that keeps the mount from going any farther this way. So this one fits like this, right up against that edge, but does not fit like this because the bolt holes don't line up and if you try to hit the transmission. So this one only goes in one way. These bolt holes are moved forward from center, and the transmission mounts on the chassis are back here. The 4Runner, which was my favorite one anyway because it's a little heavier duty, this one can go in either direction because these holes are in the center. So I have my choice of whether I want these mounting holes over here, and if I move it the other way, they're over here. So I think I'm going to keep the 4Runner. Let me get the bolts and we will mount this thing up. And while I'm over here, let's throw this thing up here on the collection and then find the bag of bolts, which I have nicely organized and yet still Can't find anything. There we go. There we go. So now that I've got the transmission mount in place, I need to start figuring out how I want to route a cross member. And for me, I just like using a piece of cardboard and seeing it in real life and see whether I want to route it over the drive shaft or under the drive shaft, and how I can mount, the imaginary pieces of angle iron in a way where I can get to the bolts to bolt it in and out. This little cardboard flange was enough to cover the bolt mounting surface on the body of the car, and then the length was a little TBD, but that matches up pretty closely with my 2-inch side of things. I think what I'm going to do is just cut a 5-inch length of this, and then I can see how it would fit if I did it short end against the car or long end against the car. So let me cut 2 5-inch sections of this, and then see how it fits and drill some bolt holes and get that bolted into the car, and then build the cross member that goes underneath it next. So it does look like the short end of this angle iron is going to fit pretty nicely, and on both sides I basically have the choice of bolts on the inside of the mount or bolts on the outside. And on this passenger side, this gives me more room for exhaust later on, so I'm going to do this. But over here on the driver's side, I've got something a little more to worry about because of this front drive shaft. And I was playing with the idea of going around this way, but I think it's just too tight. And there's going to be a CV joint here on the front drive shaft that I got to leave room for. I think instead it's going to make more sense to go this way. And then from there I can come down, hit this bottom tube. I do need to make sure there's enough room at full droop for the CV up here to not hit the cross member, so maybe I need a clearance. I don't know. I'm gonna probably just come straight under and see if that's enough room. A nice little trick to measure the spacing of bolts like this is to measure the inside distance and then measure the outside distance. And if you take the average of those two numbers, you should get exactly the distance between the centers of these two bolts. So now that I know the distance for these bolt holes, I can mark them out, and you're probably not supposed to use a caliper like that, but it works pretty well. I'm going to add a center punch so that my drill bit doesn't wander, and then take these over to the drill press. I don't have a set of metric drill bits, so I'm using the Christmas tree bit and just finding the right step that's close enough. I like to put a little Sharpie mark on the step right above where I'm going to stop, and that just helps me not drill too far. This was also the first week where school was out for the summer, so my daughter was around to help me in the garage today. She got on the drill press and helped me drill this second bracket, and then hopped right under the car to help me install them. So I got to take a break and just be the cameraman for a little bit. Okay, so the easy part is done, and I've got these brackets bolted to the car on either side of the transmission. Now I get to do the fun part and make the piece that goes across and holds the transmission up. And so for that, I've got this template. I made this little zigzag pattern, and I think what I've decided is this is going to go right under the transmission mount, and then it will zigzag back towards the transfer case so that it's out of the way of the drive shaft when the drive shaft needs to droop down. And This is a little close, flat across, so I think I'm gonna drop it down a little bit like this. And from the side, you can see that that gets it down and back so that a CV joint right here should have room. And then I'll just connect up to this bracket. So I gotta turn this into some 1x3 rectangular tubing. And fortunately, I got that already made up. So let's go take a look. All right, so take a look at this. That is my zigzag design, but with an offset. Gotta love this little cheapy Harbor Freight fab table because I can use the little stoppers to line everything up. And this stuff just, look at that. All right, I think this looks good enough to weld. I'm going to tack it together and put it under the car. So now that all the pieces are tacked together, I can take the whole assembly under the car and mark where the center point of the transmission mount is, and then also an approximate length to cut it down to so I have something more manageable to work with. Once I have the extra length cut off, the next step is drilling out the holes for the transmission mount bolts. I'm using the Christmas tree bit again to get these holes to about the right size, and then I can drill all the way through with a regular drill bit so that I have holes that are aligned top and bottom on that rectangular tubing. And then the holes that are facing down get bored out even larger so that a socket can go through and get to the bolts that go up into the transmission mount. Speaking of the bolts in the transmission mount, I had to take it out and clean out the threads because they were all gunked up with black paint, but they cleaned right out with the tap. And then with all that done, I can get it bolted onto the transmission and start figuring out how I want the end pieces to connect. All right, I got the little section of cross member bolted in to the transmission mount. Let me show you what it looks like. You can see the zigzag design there. How it goes under the front drive shaft, which I think looks great. It does look low right now, but this doesn't have the drive shaft with a CV joint. I think it's going to be pretty good. And then I'll have to make that little cardboard piece. And we're going to connect the part that goes under with the part that bolts to the car. So I'm going to start measuring where to cut down the cross member and cutting out that end piece. And we're going to get this stuff back all together. The first step is going to be cutting down the tubing to the exact length it needs to be, and you don't need a laser for something like this, but if you have one, it sure does work really, really nicely. Once it's cut down to length, I can bolt it back onto the transmission and start getting ready to use a piece of cardboard to get a template. I've lined this side piece up with the top corner of the mount to the car because I think it's going to look cleaner that way. I'll cut that corner off later. And then I can trim down my cardboard to make my final template. And then I can transfer that shape onto an extra piece of the angle iron and cut it down to just be a flat plate. I'm sure I could use 3/16 steel for this too, but I already have the angle iron. I'm going to try and use that material for as much of this as I can. Once it's all welded together, I can grind down the welds to make it look really clean and bolt it back onto the car and make sure everything lines up like it's supposed to, or move on to the passenger side. So this is the part of project car life you don't see on YouTube builds all the time. When your car sits and collects dust for 2 months because your life gets busy. My tools are even sitting under the car right where I left them when I stopped 2 months ago. And if that's not bad enough, before I can actually get anything done, I've got to clear all the junk that's piled up around the car out of the way, get it shoved over to the other side of the garage. And since I've already been paused on the crossmember for a little while anyway, I think I'm going to switch to the engine support bar, something that I can get accomplished in a short amount of time and feel good about it before I dig back into the custom crossmember. So I'm going to get that box out of the corner and start putting it together. All joking aside, since this is safety equipment, I did actually rescue the instructions, but they aren't very useful. There's basically just a picture, and I'm going to try and copy the picture. Put this in the front. All right, I'm going to throw this on the car, and let's see if I can get these things lined up with where the engine supports are. So I actually forgot that before I can put the support bar across the engine bay, I've got to get the engine hoist out of the way and get this lifting bracket out of the way. I've got the front of the engine held up with some blocks of wood, which is just temporary. So let's get this out of the way, see if we can get it to fit. There is so much room in front of the car. I don't even remember what my garage looks like without this engine hoist in the way. Much better for working. Also, look how good that engine is in there. All right, so this main bar adjusts in width, and it should go right across on the fenders, which leaves the strut towers open for getting modified later. Because I don't know when I'm going to do the engine mounts. I kind of want to work out the suspension first because they're right where upper links are going to be, and this is not a 3-link setup car, you know? All right. Okay, we got this back pickup point. Now I got to get this front one. This seems outright dangerous. This can't possibly be right, so I'm gonna have to fix this somehow. I really like that this comes off to the side. You know, I like that this supports it off the front, but I can't use this. So I'm gonna have to do some thinking. All right, it's the next day and I've fiddled with this a little bit. I had to move it back because I had positioned the engine too far forward, and it's now holding the whole weight, and it is more secure with weight on it. It kind of took up a lot of the slop. I do still have the wooden blocks under here just as a safety measure for now. I have also had this front little support bar fall off. So this has actually slipped off once, and the engine did not fall, it did tilt. So I don't think there's a lot of risk that this is going to just catastrophically fail, but I'm still probably not going to work under it. I'll just work around it. And I don't get the impression it's meant for long-term use. It's more like hold the engine up, swap engine mounts on a front-wheel drive car and move on. And let's be honest, at my rate, this is going to be here for a while. Though as cheap as these things are on Amazon, I think I'm going to get another one and just throw another main support over there and get rid of this little third leg thing altogether. I think that might be safer. I don't know. Tell me in the comments if you think I'm really dumb for getting under the car with this. And time to move on to the crossmember. So in the end, I did end up deciding that a second one of these bars was the way to go. This is much more secure and a little bit more adjustable to get it in the right spot. And in doing all of this stuff in the engine bay, I realized I have another little side quest to go on, which is the wiring harness for the engine. This basically has everything for the engine, transmission, transfer case, everything drivetrain. And this went into the cab to the ECU in the Tundra. So this got to go into the cab in the Volvo. And fortunately, this comes to the same, like, you know, right around the firewall. This looks really good. And it has this big grommet from the Tundra. And I made up a piece of cardboard that matches the patterns. I got to find a spot in the firewall to make this opening. And I think I have a good spot right here. It's nice and flat, and this can go, but kind of like right here. So I'm going to find kind of the neutral position where this wiring harness just wants to sit naturally, so it's not stretched, you know, really far over one way or pinched up the other way. And I think I'm just gonna mark it and cut it, see how it goes. I really can't. I can't keep like putting things off and thinking about them. I gotta just start doing stuff. And if that wiring harness doesn't go through there, like if it doesn't go right through that spot, where am I gonna put it? I'm gonna have to like rewire the whole engine. So I'm just gonna see what happens. Look at this. This could not have gotten any luckier. Right through, nothing behind it. A spot to snake all the way down into the cabin. Sometimes you get rewarded for just going for it. Look at that. Back under the car again. Enough little side projects and other things. Time to wrap up this crossmember and get this done. Hopefully you can see under here. It's really hard under the car to give you a frame of reference of like where we are. But this is the passenger side frame rail of the car. This is going to come straight down. I've decided I'm going to cut this here. I'll give it a little bit extra room just in case. Then we're just going to have a flat plate come straight down, and then this crossmember is going to be done. So let me just speed this up, and here is the passenger side of the crossmember, and it's just extended straight down. Lots of room over here for exhaust because I'm just not sure what I'm going to do with the exhaust, but I've got 2 catalytic converters, maybe an X-pipe, 2-into-1 muffler. I have no idea. Lots of stuff going on over here though. So going to get it tack welded here under the car, then put it on the welding table to fully burn everything in. And then I'll do some cleanup to make it look a little nicer and get it painted and installed under the car. Let's go. After getting it all welded together, I took a couple minutes to grind the corners into a nice radius just to make it look more like an off-the-shelf part instead of a bunch of scrap metal welded together. I think it looks really nice now. It was about this time I realized that I needed a way to coat the inside of the cross member to keep it from rusting out, and I came up with the idea of thinning down some paint and just sloshing it around inside to coat everything, and then letting it drip out the openings to leave a coating in all the interior crevices. So we'll see how it holds up. It seems like it worked okay to me. And with that done, a quick coat of rattle can primer and satin black, and this thing is looking like an actual custom part. I'm really happy with how this turned out. So that just leaves bolting the cross member back onto the car for the last time and getting rid of that jack stand to call this project complete. All right, well, that was a little bit of a journey, but I think it turned out great. I'm really excited to keep going, so if you enjoyed, subscribe and follow along for the next part of this adventure. Thanks for watching, and if you want to be the only other person on the planet with one of these shirts, there's a link in the description. See you next time.